You called my name, and I ran out of that place.
So we gathered today. Hopefully you had a wonderful celebration of the Christmas season together with you and your loved ones and your families. And this week we celebrate the end of the year of a time and a season of our life that we can look back and we can share and we can focus in on what truly happened, what we're able to gather and collect from another year of season of experiences brought together, both positive and negative, both experiences that help us allow where we can continue to grow, where we have grown, where we still need to grow and to improve. As a church, we've been on an adventure together. We've been able to celebrate, and it's down in the office. It's been great to look back and see where we've been. And I don't know where your favorite's been, but there's a little bit that we've been through the last several months. We've been out of the wilderness. Let's make lemonade. Won't you be my neighbor? Doctrine Decoded. Risky commitments. Killing spiders. And then, of course, our last one of kings, prophets, and prostitutes. The story of Jesus. And as a church, as we move forward, we want to continue looking at what does God desire of us and where can He use us as we seek moving forward. But a new year means new opportunities, new chances. Say, this is my year, my time, a better us. Focusing on where God is leading, what He can do with us. But here's the thing, every year at this time, tonight and into tomorrow, New Year's resolutions are cast. Millions of resolutions will be cast tonight, focusing on making this year your year. A better year, your time to shine. But here's the problem with resolutions as we begin to see only 8% will actually stick by the end of the year. 8% of all the millions of resolutions that will be cast tonight actually stick and stay. And on top of that, most resolutions are done by February. Yearly resolutions, right? So here's the thing, I focused and I was like, well, what does that mean for us as we begin to cast vision upon this year and this season? And I started looking at what the resolutions are and the top expected resolutions for 2018. And I thought I'd be able to do it Letterman style and do top 10 and count down dramatically for you. And then I didn't find my answer in the top 10, so I searched top 15 and then 20 and 25, and finally I said it's enough. Because our answer wasn't in those. But I do have them for you, my results, so you can see what the top expected ones are. I'll do it Letterman style down from 25, but it won't be as dramatic as 10, but that's okay. Number 25 is to lose weight. 24 is just to exercise. 23 is quit smoking. 22 is to quit drinking. 21, get a new job. 20, get out of debt. 19, save money. 18 is to eat healthier. 17, get organized. 16, spend more time with family. And 15 is to manage stress. 14 is to enjoy life to the fullest. 13 is to stop procrastinating. 12 is to travel. 11 is to improve a relationship. 10 is to learn a new language. 9 is to have better sleep. 8, spend less time on Facebook. 7, spend less time watching TV. 6, get rid of old clothes. 5, more biking. 4, run a half marathon or a full marathon. 3, try an extreme sport. 2, do something for charity. And number 1, have a baby. Those are the top expected goals. Some of you guys are thinking, no. And that was just to the marathon. Then I got to the baby and I really ruined it for you. But when you think about your experiences of life that we share together, and you think about all this list, and you think about it, and you're like, you know what? Eating healthier, getting organized, not procrastinating, getting financed, those all sound like amazing resolutions that I could probably tend to stick through February, right? And they'd help build happiness, they'd help build fulfillment and all this. But here's the thing that we begin to look at as we focus in at the end of the year, starting a new year of who we are. But in every moment of our day, in every aspect of all those resolutions, in the top 25 of the expected resolutions, nowhere do we see or find anything that points us towards a growing and a deeper relationship with God. Now, some of those might be fundamental aspects of your walk and your relationship. You know, for me to eat healthy, it's going to be an act of God, right? For me to finance and change, it's going to be a strenuous walk with God that says, yes, God, you got it. But I'm saying like the actual walk, the journey, the study, the passion, the praise, the worship, all those aspects that we begin to see were never mentioned in the top 25 goals of the new year. So my question is, in the midst of all that is going on, in the midst of every day of our lives and what we deal with, the ups and downs, the struggles, the journeys, the problems, the questions that we have, in the midst of all that, where is God centered? Because in the midst of that list, those all sound amazing, and they're great things for us to strive for. And a lot of them are actually spiritual aspects of spiritual peace, of money and finances, of getting to eliminate stress and rest. All those things are great. But in what aspect are we putting Christ into that story? And that is our question that we begin to have. And so as we start our new series, it's called Weapons of Self-Destruction. And you might have heard the term weapons of mass destruction. But here's the thing that we're at, and we begin to study and we search, is that for each and every one of us, of every single day, if you put your day into motion, if you think about everything that you go through in a single day, I'm not asking a week, a month, just a single day, just tomorrow or today, think about it, that we have a multitude of choices we're forced to make every single day. Every single day. Now, some of those choices might be for your better interest, and some of them might not be for your better interest. Right? A lot of times I think about this, and we joke about this after basketball games, a lot of times because we stop and eat. That triple Baconator feels not a good idea at 11 o'clock, because we feel it the whole way home. In the same way, like, we understand, like, we can't do this anymore. Those are not betterment choices for our health. But we still do it. That's the weapons of self-destruction right there. So every day of our lives, every moment, we have a choice of what decision we need to make in order to better our walk with Christ. And the problem is, when we look at our schedule, we look at our journey and our moments of every day, all those decisions lined up together, are we helping ourselves or are we self-destructing? Right? You might have heard the phrase, you might have probably used it about somebody or somebody else when you talked about the idea was, they just can't get out of their own way. You ever said that? Like, every aspect is going perfect and they got in their own way. They trip themselves up, they stumble, and they fall. We like to play the game where we drive around and we look at where people are doing at their house and property. What are they building? And why are they doing that? And, would I do that? Would I pick that color? Would I choose that? We like playing that game. You guys are all smiling like, yep, I play that game too. That's okay. I didn't say it was spiritual. I just said I like playing it. But at the same time, we begin to look at our lives, and it's easy for me. It's like, well, I shouldn't do that, or I should do this. So here's the deal. As we open this series and we look at weapons of self-destruction, as we look at several weeks of this, I don't want to be up here telling you this is right and this is wrong. Because I truly believe that each and every one of us in our own walk with Christ has to find our own piece of balance. Agreed? Your story is different than my story. Your journey, your day, your career, all those things are different. But what I do ask is that you would ask yourself this one question today. It's not rocket science, but it is deep. And the question is, what does God want from me? Got really quiet then. But begin to think about that. What does God want from me? When you think about New Year's resolutions, new moments, new decisions, new opportunities, choices that could better or hurt me, what does God desire from me in those moments? How can I take what I've been given and use that in uniformity with God? Understanding that my life is built up upon two different things. And that's what we're going to look at today. Still over busy. Now, separate those words. It's not one phrase. Still over busy. No, you can be still or busy. But how do we find stillness upon being busy? And I think that's the challenge of this week, is understanding that we can be super busy or we can be still. But the problem is that so many times we're not called to either one of those categories. To be still and to do nothing upon nothing for days upon days. Well, it's a dream. It would probably drive most of you crazy. And number two, it's not productive. It's not being with who God has created us to be. Because we understand in the moments of our life, in the moments of our walk with Christ and our journey, that anytime that you stop and you're still, things decay, they slow down, they break down, they weaken, they lessen, they drop off. So it's not so much just about being still, but also when we're super busy, when we're slammed, everything gets so chaotic, we get on the run, and all those resolutions, our good thoughts, our good moments that we desire to do, they get lost, right? And that's the busy product of our day. That you've gone through those days where you had your perfectly designed set of what you need to do, and you didn't get to any of it, and yet you were still so busy, you missed out on what was important. And there's the problem that entiles between the two. In the midst of the busyness, because we're like, at some point when I calm down and slow down, this is where I'm going to encounter God in a real way. And I got so busy. And then on this side, what happened? Finally, a day of moment of rest. I'm still, and I slept, and I slept, and I napped, and I napped. How many times did you stop and just listen to God in those moments? We took a time out, right? And so in the moment we begin to see as we walk with God is still and over busy, there's got to be a moment in between there where we find who God is. We find balance and peace of who we are. And so this is where we are. Because the problem with all our choices that we have to make, and the majority of our unhappiness actually comes in life from listening to our own desires over the desire of God. Our own desires over what we want, therefore making us self-destructive by nature. Just as we long for a better new year, a new time, and a new opportunity, how can we take what God has given us, to find in the peace of all those moments that we have, from still to busy, and to put a moment that we encounter God in a real way? And first it's answering that question, what does God want from me? But continuing from that, we begin to see, in every aspect of our day, we begin to seek this. So in the moment of being still, we begin to see in the Bible, we think that through all these moments we have here, and it counters it for us, that we have to find that balance of peace, those moments that it describes for us. Now, we think about this and we see that Mabel, newcomer, she said it was more important to know where you're going than to get there quickly. Do not mistake activity for achievement. Sometimes I'm busy, but I didn't accomplish anything. Sometimes I was going, but I didn't know where I was going. So we begin to see that we find something forming here for us. Rather than living in the still or living in the busy, he says understanding what the balance is. And in Scripture we begin to see the balance is described as the Sabbath. The Sabbath, our day of rest. Our moment in time that we have, but it just derives and it changes for us in multiple ways, the way that we can use and we can learn from that. So in the beginning we see the meaning of still here often is described in the Bible as the moment of rest. Take a moment of rest that you have here. If you're like me, moments of rest and time does not come easy. They have to be planned. And I still avoid them. And then you have to plan them again. And be prepared for, and then you take them. But spiritually we see as rest is described as this moment of Sabbath we have. It's not just a moment to sleep or to have down the time, but it says it's also the moment that not only you find rest, but it's also a moment that rejuvenates you as well. So you have rest and restoration inside that moment of Sabbath that allows you to encounter the still, but also help maintain in those moments of the busy. It's that balance between the two that we have. Sabbath is the thing that gives the theological and the practical tool to help us find balance of peace of our time. Ephesians 5, verse 15 through 17, we see Paul writing to the church here, and he's reminding them of what they have. And you might think, well, why would he be describing that they would have in their time in our changing culture that you and I would have today? And we'll mark it out here for you. But he says, be careful then how you live, not as unwise, but as wise, making the most of every opportunity. Now, if you're following along right now and you have your text in front of you, that opportunity right there, mark that as time. All right? And let's read through that point again. So be very careful then how you live, not as unwise, but as wise, making the most of every time, because the days are evil. Therefore, do not be foolish, but understand what the Lord's will is. Now, there are two Greek words for the use of time, and one is the time of day. What time is it? Well, it's 11:20 if you're counting. But that's not what he's talking to. He said that each of us have been given a time, the time. It says this is the time and fulfillment that you have been blessed with, that you've been given here on this earth to fulfill God's plan for your life. That you've been given the time to go. The opportunity and season of life to follow, to be obedient, to learn and to grow and to share. So in multiple of hours that you've been given the time to be used. So this is where he's challenged with, that we have the time. And we think that so often our time, we have multiple amounts of time, that someday I will get to that we have those moments. But the thing is, often our time will abandon us quickly. Those parents of little ones or grandparents of little ones, you know what this is like. You have those moments where you hold your child and you're like, at some point they're not going to allow me to do this anymore. They're going to change. Things are going to develop differently. Yes, they're going to grow and you're going to watch and share that moment, but you're like, what happened to that little moment when they're small and they're quiet and they were calm? Those moments grow and change as the seasons of life. But in the same way, he says, the moments you have, the time that you've been blessed with, use it in accordance of God's will. That in those moments that you have to find that Sabbath, the time in your day, the time in your life to find peace and balance is what he's leading us to. He says he wants us to seize the opportunity that we have, for our time is limited. To seize the opportunity to be good stewards of our time, because that's our opportunity to spend with Jesus. So it's not the most to make the best of our time, but most of the time. To be good stewards of it. So we begin to see that, let's be honest, in our world today, our culture today, it would be so much easier, we think, to gather together, to collectively together, because we can share more quickly. With email and FaceTime, all that, we can communicate nonstop of every moment of our days. But in the same aspect, as busy as we are in the globalization of our world, we find ourselves even busier because we're able to do more things at more times and more aspects. So it's even more important for us to find that piece of balance, that Sabbath that's going to connect us away from the still and away from the busy with our God. And putting Him in the core moments of everyday being of our lives. And that's understanding that in the Sabbath is where we're able to enjoy the creation of life, providing balance for us. In Deuteronomy chapter 5, we see that in verse 12 through 15, they're describing the Sabbath that is designed for us, and it says, observe the Sabbath day by keeping it holy. As the Lord your God has commanded you, 6 days you shall labor and do all your work. But the seventh day is a Sabbath to the Lord your God. On it you shall not do any work, neither you, nor your son or daughter, nor your male or female servant, nor your ox, your donkey, or any of your animals, nor any foreigner residing in your towns, so that your male and female servants may rest as you do. Remember that you were slaves in Egypt, that the Lord your God brought you out of there with a mighty hand and outstretched arm. Therefore the Lord your God has commanded you and observe the Sabbath day. Now, we don't want to take this as the legalistic culture that it was written in, but we also want to learn in the moments that sometimes what he's telling us here is he's reminding them of where they've been. They've been freed from their slave background as they were stuck in Egypt. They've been brought into freedom. But he says in the same way, culturally, we can go back to that slave mentality, to the world, to the busyness, if we don't find time to Sabbath in the midst of it. He says we come back as slaves to success and materialism, to our culture, to expectations, or all the above. He says we need to find time to take away from the strain of life, finding balance in our Lord who can provide us rest. Mark chapter 2, verse 27-28 says, then he said, and the Sabbath was made for man, not for man for the Sabbath. So the Son of Man is the Lord even of the Sabbath. It says he just gives us rest that we could find nowhere else. A sense of peace and balance that would be nowhere else except in Him. So in our culture, where to find Sabbath seems so much harder. We're so much more connected. It says, where can we find our Sabbath to restore us? But sometimes it's just understanding that we got to find productivity in our busy. Limit our busy. And once again, this is your story. What you fill your busy time with is on you. But the question I'm asking you, what does God desire of our busy nature, our busy lives, and how can we use those more strategically in everyday aspects? Going through our leadership studies that I did in my master's, I found that there's a chart that describes essentially what the two worlds look like. In a productive world, you kind of intentional, you're direct, you're focused. You simply limit your list down to a few things that you can accomplish for sure every day. You're clear. It defines exactly what your intent is. And more importantly, if those things don't get done, you're able to clearly look and be like, why didn't that get done? What was I doing that distracted me? Why was I not practical about my time. Why did I get procrastinating? When you're busy, you just long to do huge lists, but never you're jumping from one thing to another. You maybe never giving it your full intent, never your full task to complete. And so often it lacks direction because you jump from this thing to over here to down here, just crossing things off, or maybe you're just super organized and you do one thing and you got to rewrite the list, and then I'll do another one, rewrite the list, and then wherever you are, he says that sometimes we get in those moments and we get distracted, and it makes us busier rather than being focused in. Productive people are single-minded. They're single-task focused. That they're intentional and defines what's important in their lives at those moments. Well, multitasking, while yes, it's practical, we got things going on and we still use it. But at the same time, though, sometimes some things desire our full attention so that we can retain the knowledge of what we're doing. And then finally, we begin to see that strategically, productive people avoid saying yes to everything. That's a big one. Right? Because here's the thing that I've learned about saying yes to too many things too often. It always falls on the same weekend at the same time. How did I get convinced to be part of everything this weekend? Right? We're all smiling because we're like, you've been there. It happens about every 3 months. Something always falls on that one weekend, that one time. But he says we have to be productive with our time. But here's the thing that we understand. We each have our own different weeks, our work weeks, our commitments, our obligations, activities that fill those times. But God asks us, says, what if we just took a biblical approach as we entered each one of those? If we were direct in our methods, as we would seek intentional productivity of our days, so that in the midst of that productivity, we would still find Sabbath and rest as we encountered our God. As we would share Him, that He wouldn't get pushed out because of the busyness, but He'd be brought rather into the middle of the chaos to bring that peace and balance that we so often need. So often we think that it's just alone time, that's downtime, but He says you can use this time to grow and to share together in the midst of your life. Because in the midst of your chaos, in the midst of your story, as you're sent out and you're trying to accomplish amazing things, imagine who you encounter in those processes, in those tasks. And they might need you present and productive in their lives, just as you were encountering your story. So often we forget that I've got to get this done, and we just miss what's going on around us. And He says, in the midst of your productivity, in the midst of your challenge, that balance of piece of your story is where your story intertwines with someone else's story. And He's using us in amazing ways to say, you know what? That's Sabbath. That's the moment where you restored yourself in the midst of my presence because you were able to pour into someone else. You encountered their story, a part of your story, and that's where you found me today. It wasn't just a moment where we sat down and we read, but He says you shared and you fellowshiped with it. That's Sabbath in your story. Taking moments into your day is just peace and going. He says that's what it's good for. If you think about your story and you think about your families and how you shared, and especially in the holiday season, you might have had some busy days this last week. Some crazy busy days. And some of your best days are often labeled. You might say, yeah, we had a great day at home doing nothing. Hallelujah, we needed that. But you also have those days where you got the family together and you went out and you did something. Yes, it was a long day. It took all day, but you know, you got home and you said, that was an amazing day. It's funny how those days give you just as much rest and rejuvenation as being home some days. And what He's saying to us, He says that in the middle of your rest, understand what fuels your rest. Because sometimes sleeping is great and you need that rest, the moment of the clear definition of resting. But He says sometimes you need restored, and that becomes through our walk and a Sabbath of a moment that says we've encountered a way that we can help remotivate ourselves to keep going. Dr. Keller writes of Sabbath resting and rejuvenation. He says we have to find our season, our path, our way. He says, one, we have to plan a time of inactivity. He says sometimes you just have to clear the calendar, to empty space, to allow it to be filled. It's ironic because you think, what? I got to have a schedule. It's got to be all there. He says, no. He says, if you find a spot that's open, you'll often fill it with what sparks your interest, what motivates you. And because you're allowed to fill your time with what you desired, rejuvenates, excites, it builds passion back up. Secondly, he says, take time to do what you enjoy. Now that sounds, well, when am I going to find time? He says, in the midst of what you're doing, find time to do what you enjoy. He says, both in works, but also in life. He says, sometimes the greatest things that we enjoy are the things that we push aside. And it's the simple things. Just praising God. prayer and worship. He says sometimes those are the most critical parts to rest. Because the things that keep you up, the things that might keep you in chaos and keep you busy and stirring, might simply need to be brought before the God. A God that saves us and a God that loves us. A God that will take us in, reminds us as He restores us. He gives us that escape from life that we truly can Sabbath and rest. Exposing ourselves to the work of God rather than trying to expose God into our works. Thirdly, he says, define what recharges you, to know whether and who you are. This is a big one. For some of you, it defines just your simple makeup, whether you're an extrovert or introvert, right? If you're an extrovert, you need people in your life to motivate you and encourage you. If you're an introvert, you're like, I need some quiet time so I can rejuvenate, get going again. He says, know who you are. Know what it recharges you. And finally, he says, find your season. When seeking the Sabbath, understand that there are different seasons in your life that it's going to find hard to have a true Sabbath in. There's moments of time where it's like it's just too busy to take Sabbath in the midst of this. But he says, here's what happens. Sometimes the harder and harder it takes time to find Sabbath in your life, you find yourself locked out permanently. And when those moments happen, when you steer away from taking time to experience God in the middle of all that you're doing, he says we experience burnout. Our prayer weakens. Worship lacks. And our study dies. He says, understand what you have. So our goal for us is in this new year, and asking God, what do you desire from us? Is for us to understand, God, where do you want us to put Sabbath within my schedule? Where can I put Sabbath in the midst of my busy, chaotic life? So I'm not just still, but I'm not over busy, that I'm finding rest, productivity, and balance in the middle of Sabbath. That allows us to experience Christ in a real way, that allows us to understand in the middle that He continues to seek us, even when we're crazy, even when our moments are hectic. He says, in all that you have and all that you are, an atonement of everything that you experience, let's use that to bring glory to God. But with that, we understand that we have to trust God. Because to honor God with our time and our Sabbath is huge. It's difficult. It's breaking away from what we've always known and done to find a balance in between. But we understand we can do this through His help. His freedom in the gospel. As He breaks us away from our slavery aspect to this material world. What He tells us, He says in the beginning, our Sabbath is our tool. Is our tool to help break us free. To avoid self-destruction. As you and I passionately pursue the kingdom of God. As we wait for the promise of our future kingdom to be revealed.